on today's show how Jabari Smith Jr.'s offensive breakthrough is earning him a bigger role with the Rockets this season, plus updates on Alperen, Sengun, and Steven Adams. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now the #1 sports podcast network. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Now today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym, or on the last day of this year, 2025. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. And joining us now is your weekly co-host, the Podfather himself, Rockets Wire editor and host of the Rockets Launch Pod, Ben DuBose. You can track down on Blue Sky at Ben DuBose. And Ben, we've got a stacked episode here today. We're going to get updates from you a little bit later on Alperen, Sengun, and Steven Adams. You were at Rockets practice. You got the updates about where they're both at health-wise with their respective injuries. A little bit later on, we'll get into a kind of a wide-ranging view at the kind of looking at the Western Conference, the state of the Western Conference, if you will, in particular with, this very significant injury to one Nikola Jokic and how that impacts the Denver Nuggets and what that'll do to kind of shake up some standings out West. And obviously as it pertains back to our Houston Rockets. And then, but where we're starting this thing off is Jabari Smith Jr. kind of experiencing a bit of a breakthrough here, I guess, right? And I think it's fair to call it a breakthrough because we're seeing him posting career best numbers offensively this year. We know what he's capable of defensively. We've seen that since, very early on in his career, and he's continued to grow and evolve on that side of the floor as well. But offensively, it really does look like he's coming into his own. And there was a lot of optimism that we had in the offseason thinking about how much better Jabari Smith Jr. could get, learning from and playing alongside Kevin Durant, a guy who has some similar skill sets, right? You can see some parallels in their respective games, how they approach, how they attack defenses, how they play over the top of defenders, those kinds of things. What are you seeing from Jabari here this season so far?
So you look at the numbers, and he's averaging career highs across the board offensively. Points per game, true shooting percentage, overall field goal percentage, three-point percentage. And we spoke with Ime Udoka about it before Monday's game, and it was clear that even offensively, where he thinks Jabari took the biggest leap was in physicality with the work he did on his body. And you often think of when you hear someone bulking up or hear about someone bulking up that it's for the defensive end of the court. So they can hold up better in the post. We saw early in his career, Bari sometimes struggled with the more physical bigs and didn't have enough sand in his pants, so to speak. But offensively, Ime thinks it's really helped him with being able to hold his own on those drives and not get bumped off his spots. It's made him a much more diverse offensive player to where he can attack closeouts and put the ball on the floor and sometimes create for other guys. Whereas in the past, it's been threes and not much else because the in-between game, he just didn't have the physicality to absorb the level of contact that goes on in the NBA. And so because he's a much more diverse player, I also think it's gotten him a better quality of three-point looks because he's much more comfortable with getting to his spots anywhere on the floor. He can be a little bit more selective from three-point range. Playing with Kevin Durant helps with that as well. But I think where it's most noteworthy, Jackson, you look at the Rockets' net ratings. So overall, on-court, off-court, he's third behind Steven Adams and Amen Thompson with the differential when they play and when they don't. But offensively, Jabari is actually #1. The Rockets are 7.8 points better when Jabari plays than when he sits. And that's the biggest net rating differential on offense of the entire team. And I think it just speaks to how well-rounded he is. In today's NBA, it's a league that so often is about you're only as strong as your weakness. And in Jabari's case, there isn't really a weakness. Like, I feel like when we talk about these players, we often look at their highlights because social media sort of lends itself to highlight culture. But in terms of how you win in the NBA, I mean, teams will scout and attack your weakness. Well, Jabari is so well-rounded. He may not have the consistent highlights, but there's really no weakness offensively. His game is very diverse, and most importantly, he doesn't need the ball in his hands to make an impact. So on a team where there are a lot of mouths to feed in terms of playmaking reps, shooting reps offensively, the fact that Jabari can make an impact without the ball in his hands, the fact that he's well-rounded, he doesn't have a clear weakness, I think that's what that differential really speaks to. He's just such a well-rounded player, defensively as well, but I think offensively, he's so unique on a team that has so many top-shelf playmakers and creators. The fact that he can make an impact without needing a ton of shots, without needing a ton of touches, I just think it's so valuable for this team.
He really is one of the most, when you think about it, the most plug and play players in the NBA. Like, not even just like looking at the Rockets roster, but you can play him in so many different contexts, right? You can slide him up and play him at the 5 and go, small ball with him as your 5. You can play the jumbo lineups where he's all the way down at the 3 because he's just a jumbo sized wing at that point. And then to your idea of, like, I will say, I mean, I've been really encouraged with a lot of his offensive growth this season. And the thing that has stood out is how much more confident he is putting the ball on the deck and closing and like actually attacking when teams are trying to run him off the 3-point line. Because you're right, in the past, right, he was kind of maybe not a one-trick pony, but there was very much like just, hey, Jabari, go spot up at the 3-point line, knock down threes. That's your only job on offense, right? And not really a ton of room to experiment or see if he had more of a bag or that kind of stuff. But this season, it's felt like he's done a significantly better job on drives to the rim of not over dribbling, of making sure that he takes, one or two really strong dribbles and then uses that length and then extends past a defender, finishing at the rim. And I'm sure that those are conversations that I'm sure him and KD are having, right? Like, hey, no wasted dribbles, right? We hear Kevin Durant talk about that a lot, where Kevin, really preaches his ability to take 1-2 dribbles, get to his spot, and then no wasted movement, no wasted dribbles, none of that. And so the two of them being able to work in tandem like that, you see a lot of Jabari's growth this year offensively and how KD is kind of rubbing off on him in different regards.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the playmaking has come around, what he's able to do off of those closeouts. I mean, handling the physicality is part of it, but also the vision has improved. It feels like the game has slowed down for him. That's something you hear players say a lot, because I think that's the way it feels. The processing is a beat quicker than it's been in the past. And I just think when you look at the stat line, you will think that the uptick is in the shooting, and statistically it is. But I think the way Ime and the Rockets are looking at this, and they're probably right, is that the shooting is a byproduct of the other areas of his game taking a leap forward. The shooting was always going to be there. There's a reason why, coming out of Auburn, that this guy was billed as a really good shooting prospect. It's just his game was so one-dimensional early in his career, he wasn't able to consistently get the quality of looks. Well, now, because he's able to do more things off of those closeouts, driving inside, making plays for others, because his game is much more diverse, it inherently lends itself to the quality of threes you get being a lot higher, being more in rhythm. It's just a much more well-balanced player. And now that he's more balanced, the threes are coming at greater volume and greater accuracy. Like, everything else is falling in line. And on a team that already has so many other top-shelf options offensively, it makes perfect sense that the one guy who doesn't necessarily need the ball in his hands to be maximized, that's the guy who's going to be, in a way, your most valuable offensively, because he enables the other guys to do what they do.
Mentioned those career highs for Jabari Smith Jr. Career high in attempts right now, 12.4 attempts per game. Career high shooting the 3-ball, 38.4% there. Career high 2-point percentage at 53.8%. His free throw shooting is a little bit down from previous numbers, floating in the low 80s, but I'm sure that number will level out as the season progresses. But when you think about, and then to top it all off, right, averaging points per game, 15.8 points per contest at this point, after, previously through his career, a couple averages of 12, one average of 13. So highest points per game in his career to date as well. So looking at this body of work that Jabari has put together and looking at his efficiency and kind of where he kind of slots in, as an offensive weapon for this Rockets team, is there an argument to be made that Jabari Smith Jr. is actually best suited to be the Rockets' third option behind Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun, or even potentially their second offensive option? We're going to unpack that coming up here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel's making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes, taking a look at different boosts, bonuses, and surprises. It adds extra energy to Friday Night Basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Remember, the best way to help us grow the show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. The comments help us out a ton. Give us your thoughts about Jabari Smith Jr.'s growth this season, where he's at offensively at this stage in his career. And Ben, I've been kind of tinkering with this for a little bit, like sitting on this idea, right? It's just this Rockets team. We've talked a lot, and we've spilled a lot of ink and a lot of minutes on this very show and other shows talking about the Rockets' kind of offensive hierarchy, right, and how things would change with the addition of Kevin Durant. And I think we're slowly seeing the team start to adjust and understand, hey, like they need to be more intentional about getting KD the ball, getting him the ball in his spots, right, making sure that they don't ice him out of a game unintentionally by just kind of freewheeling and doing their own stuff. Guys need to be able to play their roles, and the two stars of this team are absolutely, without a doubt, Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun, right? The offense needs to be running through those guys when either of them are on the floor, right? Any possessions that don't involve one of them in some capacity, probably a wasted possession at the end of the day. The best teams play through their star players, and the Rockets need to be able to do that and hone that skill ahead of what is hopefully a deep postseason run. But then you get into this kind of dilemma where, who is that third banana after Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun? And, conventional wisdom would say Thompson, right? He's incredibly talented. He's super gifted, but he's also still really raw offensively, right? There's some games where it looks like he's unstoppable, but then there's other games where you don't really feel his impact as much offensively. And some of that has to do with how other teams scheme against him, how aggressive they are in forcing him into those wide open long distance shots, which are generally a pretty big win for the defense since he's only shooting 19% from three this season. There might be a legitimate argument to be made here that, like, as the Rockets are kind of settling into their offensive hierarchy, that Jabari Smith Jr. makes a lot of sense as a third option, or maybe even, and this might be a little aggressive here, I might even go so far as say potentially like second option. And I only say that because I firmly believe that this team is at its deadliest when Alperen Sengun is facilitating at a high level for his teammates. And if Alperen Sengun can afford to take a bit more of a backseat scoring wise and prioritize creating opportunities for his teammates, and if Jabari is able to fill that role and get up to 18, 20 points a game consistently as a scoring threat, then that's an even more dangerous version of the Rockets than just Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun doing the heavy lifting, scoring the ball.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, but I would say let's table it until March. I think right now, with majority of the season still in front of them, Thompson and Reed Shepherd clearly have higher ceilings offensively as engine types than Jabari Smith Jr. does. That's not a slight at Jabari. That's just speaking to his archetype as a player. And so with the majority of the season in front of you, I would still give as many opportunities as possible to Amin and Reed, particularly on ball. Let's see how they develop, how much they improve. Reed specifically, just look at what we're seeing on a close to every game basis right now compared to the end of October. It's night and day different. So I would continue with the status quo. However, there is going to come a point when this season just is what it is. And any big jumps for your younger guys are more likely to come in the off season and future years. And there's going to come a point where you have to just try and maximize what you've got, certainly by the playoffs, but really the weeks leading into the playoffs. And last year we sort of saw this with the Rockets turning to the double big with Steven Adams and Alperen Sengun together. That started in early March. And I think the reason it started then, some of it was desperation, but some of it was just sort of like, at that point, your team is what it is. Its limitations are what they are. And so how do we maximize what we have right now? And there may come a point where it makes sense to do that with Jabari Smith Jr. But right now, especially with the team winning at a high level, they're 20-10, they've won 3 in a row. I would be inclined to give those playmaking reps as much as possible to Amen and Reed, who have higher ceilings, and then let's revisit this in March. But yeah, like there's an argument you could make. Jabari's coming along and he's just 22 years old. He's still getting better. It's year 4, but he's so much younger than most other guys in his draft class. He has more upward mobility even at this stage than I think a lot of people think. And there could come a point to have that conversation. I'm just not there now. And I also think you need to be very careful with not asking too much offensively to the point where it takes away from his utility defensively. Like, I think Jabari gets too much criticism defensively right now. I think, to go back to that same highlight culture analogy, I think because he doesn't have the defensive playmaking that Amen Thompson and Tari Eason do, you don't see him with the big steal and run out type plays. He's had a few weak side blocks that are highlight worthy, but for the most part, Jabari's value is as a connector. He funnels guys the right way. He communicates. But in today's NBA, where you can clip, the big time play make, or if somebody gets blown by, and spoiler alert, in today's NBA, everybody gets blown by from time to time. Even Amen Thompson, guards are just so quick these days. Nobody can be physical. And so, yeah, Jabari theoretically can switch 1 through 5, but of course, at nearly 7 feet tall, there's going to be some six footers that blow by him from time to time. It happens. The point is, just like on offense, his value defensively is not just what he provides individually, it's for the collective. And so I think that is still very important to his value with this Rockets team. Ime Udoka has talked about that as well. And so when you talk about dialing up a guy's role on offense, there can be a little bit of a decrease in how much juice he has defensively. And so the formula right now, it depends on Jabari. I'm not going to say he's their best defensive player, but he's a very important one. And so as long as the team's winning at a respectable rate, I would largely stay the course with the formula. However, coming out of the All-Star break, if you see some slippage, if these young guys hit a wall, then yeah, it is something. It's a club in the bag for Ime Udoka. Let's put it that way, that perhaps they can revisit a few weeks down the line if need be. Hopefully it won't be.
Yeah, I just, trying to, picture and looking ahead right towards a potential postseason battle, that kind of thing. Think about, this past, playoffs against the Golden State Warriors, where it's just like, and this is obviously a very different Rockets team. They have a complete offensive cheat code in Kevin Durant. Alperen Sengun is another year older, wiser. He's got that playoff experience now. And when you have two offensive players that are so gifted as those two are, it will lead to opportunities for other guys just playing off of their gravity. But I can't help but think that having another kind of go-to offensive option, right? And just Jabari's not going to be the guy who's, carving you up and getting, highlight level, handle clips and whatnot on the perimeter. He's not that kind of offensive player, but just the idea that you can go to I think Jabari can be a somewhat consistent go-to offensive threat, right? Like posting him up, getting to him in the high post where he's facing up defenders, or his back to the basket game. That has become a really consistent staple of his offense, of his game. And the Rockets utilize it when there's mismatches and stuff, but being able to reliably go to it, especially in a tight game, if Sengun just doesn't have it, or if the matchup's not there, or if KD is getting double and triple teamed, I think that's a reliable thing that the Rockets can lean on.
You just said my final point, which is in a tight game. How many big shots has he hit this season, Jackson?
Big shot Bari, man.
His willingness to take those shots says so much. Like, a lot of young guys, and it's not a serious knock. Like, guys can evolve into that over their careers. But when we talk about other young guys that might get those reps instead, you do have to ask the question, when the stakes are really high in the playoffs, the lights are bright, and opposing defenses are trying to take KD and Alp out of the game more than ever, who's willing to take and make those big shots? Jabari is, and that's a part of his value. Like, he does not shrink from the moment. He wants the ball in big spots. And offensively, a lot of times in the playoffs, that's what it comes down to. Who wants it most? He's not afraid of the moment, and that matters.
Coming up, we'll talk about the Rockets' injury woes. Not as bad as we thought they might be, thankfully. Some good news on the horizon. Some bad news, though, for the Denver Nuggets and Nikola Jokic, plus a look at the Western Conference standings. We'll get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. During basketball season, there's nothing like being in the building. The energy, the crowd, that first big run that gets everyone on their feet. Fans want to be there for those moments, not stuck refreshing screens or guessing what tickets are actually going to cost. That's where Game Time comes in. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage back, making it incredibly easy to score amazing tickets fast, simple, and without the guesswork. Browsing the Game Time app is straightforward and intuitive. Finding tickets takes just a few taps. Prices include the fees up front, so the total total is clear from the start. Whether it's an NBA game or another live event, everything is right there in one place. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today and get in on the action. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, Ben, you were at Rockets practice. You got the updates on Alperen, Sengun, and Steven Adams. Hit us with the good news.
Yeah, Alperen Sengun, Ime Udoka anticipates him playing in Brooklyn, says as of now, he's probable. Now they'll issue a report later today, Wednesday evening, confirming that, but assuming there's no regression, in other words, assuming he doesn't wake up feeling worse than he did on Tuesday, he's likely to play. He went through a workout. Ime estimated he's about 90%, and everything looks good to go. In my opinion, they never would have let him play on Christmas when he was listed as questionable with calf tightness if they had any concerns of this turning into a Giannis type situation. In other words, it becoming a real strain that takes you out for, a month or so. The fact that they let him play on Christmas, to me, was pretty conclusive that they had evidence showing that this was pretty minor, that it's something that just needed a few days to heal. And they did it at a good time in the schedule, because with this relative break, it will have been a full week between last Thursday, Christmas night in LA, and this Thursday, assuming he plays against the Brooklyn Nets. So very minor strain, a week should be sufficient, and he should be good to go. Steven Adams, Ime estimated at Tuesday's practice that he's questionable. So there was some stiffness and some swelling, but that he woke up feeling pretty good, and that basically they'll see how he feels in Brooklyn. But fortunately, it doesn't look like a particularly severe sprain. If there's any possibility of him playing 72 hours after suffering the sprain, it's obviously not that severe. So we'll see if he's available in Brooklyn. If not, I thought Clint Capela's looked pretty decent the last couple of games, so hopefully he's able to hold down the fort in the short term. I know the Nets have won more games than expected, but they're still not a good team. Rockets are going to be heavy favorites for a reason. So worst case, you should be able to buy Steven Adams a couple more days. But, I mean, all in all, it's very good news. Even if Steven doesn't play Thursday, just the fact that he's questionable coming off an ankle sprain tells you that it's not a bad ankle sprain. It's something that's manageable, and we're talking about days rather than weeks.
Yeah, that wording is fantastic. I was worried that with, Steven, that it'd be an injury that might hold him out for, a couple weeks or whatever. And especially with how cautious the Rockets have been in the past with him, still kind of, being cautious about playing him on back-to-backs, that kind of just the overall nature of how they've handled Adams' health since he's been a member of the Houston Rockets. I was worried that it might turn into something a bit more long-term. So that's very encouraging to hear in that regard. And it'll be a ton of fun to watch, to get the big fella Alpi back in the middle and have him tearing it up once again.
And in some ways, I think, in the long run, you need both of those guys. But in the short term, I'm sure both of them like when they have an even longer leash. In the grand scheme, of course, you want Alpi and Steven both. But it's like these last couple of games when Steven got to start and you got to totally turn him loose and he gets to play with the starters, then he got to have a lot of fun with that, and people see how valuable he is. And now maybe you have to lean on Sengun a little bit more, not too much, because I don't think you necessarily want to play him, 40 minutes coming off the calf strain, but there's an even longer leash for Alfie. And so on the balance, you need both those guys, but in the short term, if one needs to step up a little bit more, I mean, that's why you have two starting level centers. That's why you put a team like this together.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Now, the Nuggets don't have a starting caliber center quite to the level of one Nikola Jokic, who is set to miss the next 4 weeks at minimum, 4 weeks until he'll be reevaluated. Had a hyperextension is what they're calling it. It looked like one of his teammates kind of like fell backwards into his leg, and he, though the worry was originally that he might have suffered an ACL tear, which would have just been such terrible news, because I mean, look, just as an unbiased, like, just basketball fan, right?
Yeah.
The season that Jokic putting together is historic, right? He should be the runaway favorite for the MVP, for his fourth MVP, which is kind of nuts to think about. He's been incredibly dominant, but you don't wish injuries upon anybody, but this is really good news for the Rockets when you look at the kind of the lay of the land of the Western Conference, where things are kind of stacking up. Nuggets are only one game ahead of the Rockets in the standings. Kind of surprising given the fact that the Rockets went through that really ugly skid of games and lost, to three bad teams, right? They should probably only have about 7 losses right now if they hadn't, goofed off in those bad games against the Pelicans, the Kings, and the Clippers. But when you look at kind of where things are in the standings, you've got the Thunder at 28-5. You've got the Spurs right behind them at 23-9. And then the Nuggets right in front of the Rockets at 22-10. And then obviously Houston right there at 20-10 with the head-to-head tiebreaker over the Lakers also sitting at 20-10. I think this is encouraging because the Nuggets, like coming into the season, we kind of had it pegged Thunder in their own tier, Nuggets in a tier, and then Rockets in that tier right after the Nuggets. And that was only because of the Fred VanVleet injury, right? Before, when Fred was healthy, like I was confident in putting the Rockets ahead of the Nuggets, honestly, for this season, at least as far as regular season performance is concerned. The Fred injury kind of turned things on its head a little bit, but I think this is going to be really consequential at the end of the day for like the Nuggets are going to struggle. They have a net, like their net rating in the non-Jokic minutes is like in the tank, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately. Great for us, unfortunately for them. And so this is a chance where the Nuggets might find themselves in free fall over these next 4 weeks. Like they'd be lucky to kind of just tread water and stay at 500 basketball for the next 4 weeks. So they could plummet in the standings. And that gives the Rockets a chance to really build up some kind of standings equity, if you will, to build up a buffer between themselves and the Nuggets for further down the line, especially when you consider that the Nuggets are currently leading them in the head-to-head matchup 2-1.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a path for the Rockets to get on the 2-3 line and thus avoid the Oklahoma City Thunder until the Western Conference Finals. And who knows, maybe not even then. Maybe the Thunder lose before the West Finals and you don't have to play them at all. I know the Thunder lost to the Spurs, but they're still, by all metrics, one of the best teams that we've seen in the NBA. So if you can be on the opposite side of the bracket, that's a big deal. And yeah, this is going to hurt Denver. And so the Lakers are already showing signs of slipping. The Nuggets are going to slip some. Now, I've seen some suggesting, will the Nuggets fall to the play-in range? I don't see that. Let's estimate Jokic misses 20 games. So they have 10 losses now. Let's say they go 6-14, which feels a little aggressive, but whatever, 6-14. So the closest team to them that I take seriously would be the Warriors, who I think have 16 losses. I know the Suns have 13. I'm still not buying in on the Suns as like a 45-plus win team, Jackson. I'm not. The closest team...
To be fair, playing devil's advocate on the Suns, they still haven't had a healthy Jalen Green yet.
Oh, now you're sticking up for Jalen Green? That's your boy now?
Hey, wow. Shots fired, Ben.
No, I'm just kidding. But I think the Warriors are the team that outside of the current top 6 have the most like upward mobility. Like they can go from, they can win like 8 or 9 games in a row and nobody would be that shocked. Like they have the horses. Well, if they go 14-6 in this span where the Nuggets go 6-14, and I think both of those are probably exaggerated, but I think that's like a best and worst case scenario. Even after that, the Nuggets are down like 2 games with Jokic coming back and also getting like Cam Johnson, Aaron Gordon, the other guys coming back. So the point is like there's already such a buffer. I don't think the Nuggets are going to fall to the play-in range. So I think worst case, you're talking about them somewhere 4-6. But I just think if you can get to the 2 line for the Rockets, that's the goal. I know it didn't work out for them last year, but get on the opposite side of the bracket from the Thunder and draw a team out of the top 6. That's as much as you can ask for. Like so much of the playoffs comes down to matchups and luck and randomness. So there's no guarantees no matter what seed you're in. But I do think the way it's shaping up, the 2 seed is very valuable this year. Yes, I know there's some trauma because they had it last year. It didn't work out. But with the Nuggets going down and the Spurs are starting to leak a little bit as well. They've lost 2 home games to the Jazz and the Cavs in recent days. So if you can get on that 2 line, opposite side from OKC, a play-in team instead of any of the top 6, although I don't know, Jackson, I might prefer playing the Lakers and the Warriors. I don't know how you feel about that, but let's say that the Lakers are the 5 and 6 and the Warriors are the 7. That might be the one scenario where I don't want the 2, but we can talk about that at a later date.
Oh no, I wanted to. So I had the thought where also I wanted to add this thought where just like, the thing about the Nuggets and this next, month, 20 games or so, give or take, it could play out to where Denver is unable to make up the ground that they lose, and Denver might find themselves slotted in as the 4-5 seed when it's all said and done, and they might just not have enough runway to gain back those lost games, right? Because the Lakers are still, with even though they're showing signs of slipping, slowing down, whatever, they are probably still, going to be high 40s, low 50s at minimum, just because it's a Luka-led team and he's a walking 50-win team, kind of similar to how James Harden used to be back in the day. And then the Spurs, while they're slipping a little bit, right? They're young, they're talented. Like, I think there's an outcome here where maybe Denver's like fighting and scrapping and clawing just to claim like a 4th or a 5th seed, which puts them in the same bracket as the Thunder. And so that could be really beneficial down the line. But I was going to ask you, if the Rockets did get the 2, would you be emotionally ready for a rematch with the Warriors yet again? I know I'm right there too, man. I hate feeling that way. It's so miserable. And the Warriors are legitimately a worse team this year. Like, they are a worse team than they were last year. And yet I still don't know if I could handle, like,
because if you lose to them again,
at that point, I might just have to go 0 dark 30. Like, I might just disappear off the face of the planet if they lose to the Warriors again in the playoffs.
Well, Jalen Green will take care of them in the play-in. That's the way to look at it. Since we're now both on board the Jalen Green fan club, the Suns and Warriors can play in the 7-8, and Jalen Green can do what he didn't do last year and beat Steph Curry.
There we go. That, I like that storyline a lot better. Jalen Green gets his redemption against the Warriors, and the Rockets don't have to see those stupid gold and blue jerseys in the playoffs. And then
the Rockets
whatsoever.
get cooked by Dylan Brooks. No, I kid. I kid.
Oh man, that's a mess. All right, and so in conjunction with this conversation about Jokic's injury and how it's impacting the Nuggets, there's kind of this other conversation that's crept up a little bit amongst NBA fans that I thought it'd be fun to discuss on the show. But this idea of, it seems like people have, there's fans are kind of split on this whole, the 65 game minimum to be eligible for individual awards and accolades that the NBA instituted. How many years ago has that been? Like, I mean, it's been a
like
pretty recent
3,
trend.
I think, 2 or 3, like fairly recent. Yeah.
Okay. So, I thought it made some sense when they did it because, like, obviously, like, okay, how are you going to win MVP if you only play like 60 games, right? Like, but, at the end of the day, the numbers are the numbers, and health is sometimes, it's injuries are a part of the game. You can't control if you miss time. I get all that. Where do you stand on the basis of, like, do you like the 65 game rule? Do you think it's kind of silly? Like, if Jokic falls in and plays 62 games this season because of this injury, but he's putting up these historic numbers, should he still be in contention for MVP? Like, should they lower the minimum games threshold? Should they get rid of it altogether? Like, where do you stand on this?
I think it should be a sliding scale based on which award it is. And I know some people will hear that and say, oh, you want it to be more arbitrary? Well, it's arbitrary to begin with. Like, none of this
it's intentionally arbitrary.
Yeah. And so I guess my point is, I can understand it a little bit more for MVP. But all NBA, like, if we're talking about the 15 best players in the league, are we really going to act like a guy who played 75% of his season, let's say 60 or 61 games out of 82, can't be one of the 15 most valuable players in the NBA that year? I mean, of course they can. And so I understand why, like, they came up with a 65 game rule to make it as simple as possible. And I sort of understand it from an MVP perspective. When we're talking about the single most valuable player in the NBA that season, then yeah, durability should be a part of that. But I don't know if it has to be like across the board. Like, some of these, again, if we're talking third team all NBA, someone between 11 and 15, are we really going to act like you can't miss 20 games and still be in that tier? That's where, to me, I'm sympathetic to it from an MVP perspective, because maybe it's the Harden fan in me, but I do appreciate durability from top players. But yeah, some of the other stuff, like, if you play 75% of the year, yeah, you can easily be an all-NBA type player. That, to me, feels like overkill.
And honestly, the other part of it too that is problematic, I think, is I guess it's less so an issue for the individual accolades, like the season awards, right? MVP, Sixth Man of the Year, though, because those are, they look great on a resume. They're awesome accolades for players to collect, but they're, at the end of the day, it's an award, but it has no basis on anything else other than just bragging rights, I guess. But yeah, like the issue comes in when you talk about the all NBA selections, the all defensive team selections. Those selections have bearing on whether or not like a player is eligible for like
I know
money and contracts, and that's where it gets kind of messy. And that's where I could see like they probably should have some level of like leniency or being a little bit more forgiving in that regard, because if you play 61 games and you're 4 games off the minimum requirement to make an all-NBA squad, but you were clearly one of the best 15 players, like, I don't know, that one's where it's, I don't like the max contracts and stuff are tied to the All-NBA teams in the first place, but I don't know what they would do differently. I don't know how they would change it to, I guess, incentivize those players, to encourage them to, hey, like if you make All-NBA, like you get more money. Like I don't know what else they could do, how they could, level that out. But
just as a thought exercise, I don't like it being tied to the All-NBA or the all defensive teams for that matter. Like I can understand the case for not having Wemby as defensive player of the year if he misses over a quarter of the season and there's someone else you want to reward. But are we going to say that he's not one of the 10 most impactful players defensively? That's ridiculous. Yeah. So yeah, I think you can have sort of a sliding scale depending on what the threshold is. If we're talking about the literal best in the entire NBA in terms of MVP, or I guess with defense, like all defensive guy, then okay. But if we're talking about 10 or 15, no, that's way too rigid.
I like the idea of the sliding scale. That might have some legs, Ben. Good job. All right, before we get out of here, it is New Year's Eve. So thank you if you're hanging out with us here on New Year's Eve, if you're prepping for your New Year's Eve festivities. Ben, our next episode is going to be Rockets New Year's resolutions. We're dropping that one on New Year's Day with weekly co-host Brandon Scott. So be on the lookout for that. But Ben, before we get you out of here, give me one of your Rockets New Year's resolutions. What do you have for us?
Biggest one for me, keep Tari Eason healthy and find out who he is once and for all as a player. Because his development the last 2 years has been so stunted by the injuries. Like, he obviously didn't get the contract extension, and so we're heading into next offseason, and we still don't know exactly what his long-term role is going to be in the NBA. Like, first and foremost, he's got to prove that he can stay on the floor. And then secondly, is he a super sub off the bench? Does this new role as a starter take off to where he's the perfect glue guy in the starting lineup alongside those high usage guys in much the same way that Jabari Smith Jr. is, as we talked about leading off this show? There's still so much uncertainty with Jabari Smith Jr. for a lot of reasons, most notably contractually. 2026 is the year that we need to have answers to those. What did I say?
Jabari.
Oh, jeez.
Jabari's locked up already, man. You're good.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's all good.
You know where I'm going with that. Yeah. So Tari Eason in 2026, this is the year where that needs to get sorted out. And so there's a lot of ripple effects, a lot of implications, but I'll start with the obvious. Keep him healthy, because it's got to start there to determine what the value is, what his role is going to be. Let's just keep him on the floor. Keep Tari Eason healthy. Do whatever you want to do to get him on the floor. That's resolution number one.
We want your thoughts in the YouTube comments about Jabari Smith Jr.'s growth, about the state of the Western Conference right now, about the potential seeding implications with Jokic's injury, all that good stuff. Give us all your thoughts in the comments. Give us your Rockets New Year's resolutions as well. You can drop them under this episode. You can wait until our next episode where we actually share more Rockets resolutions, however you want to do it. But Ben, you know the drill. Let everybody know where to track you down at.
Yep. Ben DuBose on all the socials, and LaunchPod790 on Twitter. If you go to the link tree in the bio, you can find all the links to everything else I've got going on. Clutch Fans USA Today's Rockets Wire, the Clutch Fans YouTube post-game reaction shows, everything you need. Just go to the LaunchPod790 page on Facebook, hit up that link tree, and you can find all the Ben DuBose referrals you could ever want.
And that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thanks so much for checking out the show. Remember, the best way to help us grow the show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets in 2026, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.